All right, welcome back to another episode of the Blakey Lock Show. I'm your host, Blakey Locks. This is the post college football playoff slash NFL wildcard preview episode. The college football season is officially in the books. It is always a sad day. I say this every single year, but it seems like the season just absolutely flew by. Even the few week break you get in between the end of the regular season and the playoff, it seemed like that time just goes by so fast. Less of a break in between the semifinals and the championship game this year makes that time go even faster. It's hard to believe that game was this past Monday night. It seems like a lifetime ago already. Obviously not the way we wanted it to go. It was a tough night. Going to get into the game a little bit, but mostly want to kind of focus on moving forward in the NFL wildcard and stuff that's more important coming up this weekend. But just touching a little bit on the college football season as a whole in terms of my betting record. I know a lot of people were following all season. It wasn't a good start to the season. It was really tough the first few weeks. Just felt like a lot of things weren't going my way, which I hate to use excuses like that, but when you bet a lot of games week by week, year by year, you're going to have stretches like that where things just are kind of going against you. And as long as you're looking at it rationally, that's an okay thing to say. If every time you lose a bet, it's like, oh, this didn't break my way, and that's how you end up getting into some trouble and kind of convincing yourself that you're just unlucky and you got to keep pushing. But as long as you look at things rationally and you say, okay, my process here was good, my handicap was good, it's just the couple penalties here, turnovers here just didn't go my way, then you know you're doing the right thing. And if you just stick with your process, then things should go well. And if you want to adjust your process a little bit to take some more things into account, obviously you can do that. But things got a little bit better towards the end of the season. It was a really good championship weekend that really kind of got things going. And then it was a profitable bowl season. So the final record ended up at 151, 143, and 6, plus 8.1 units on the season. So again, like I said, it wasn't the best season. Last year was my best season ever in college football. It was a monster year, and that was awesome. But any year you spend the entire season betting a bunch of games and you end up in the black, positive, plus 8.1 units, you got to take it. And obviously, things also didn't end the way we wanted it to by cashing the massive 66-1 Washington future. That would have been an unbelievable way to end the season. Would have made it all worth it. Obviously, that didn't happen, but still, like I said, really happy with how the season ended. Still feel really good about the process, sticking with that process going into next season. So really happy about that. In terms of this show going forward, it really has been more of a college football show. I just think, despite the fact that over the last 4 years, I would have been giving out my picks publicly. I've been better betting the NFL, I think every season. But college football is just so much more interesting to talk about. There's so much more drama and storylines and different games and crazy matchups and so much more to talk about. I just think it makes for much more interesting podcasting to talk about college football versus the NFL. But obviously, with college football in the books, I'm going to be doing a show for every round of the NFL playoffs the rest of the way through the Super Bowl. And then after that, going to just kind of go from there, see where we're at, try to get some people on to talk some college basketball as we head towards the tournament, and cover March Madness and stuff like that, and try to preview the MLB season, NBA, NHL playoffs, all that kind of stuff. So that's all kind of stuff I definitely don't consider myself an expert at. So that's where it could be more fun to get some interesting guests and have them come in to talk about college basketball, NBA, NHL, that kind of stuff. So um, that's kind of where we're at going forward. Like I said, just wanted to touch on the national championship game a little bit before we get into the wild card stuff. So obviously the game didn't go the way we wanted. I was nervous going into the game. The market reaction was kind of saying Michigan. A lot of people that I really value their opinion were saying Michigan's going to win the game. Um, but people that had happened all year. It happened not so much in the Texas game. I think a lot of people liked that matchup for Washington, despite the fact that they were underdogs. But definitely in the Pac-12 championship game against Oregon, and even the first matchup in the regular season against Oregon State in the regular season, there were a few matchups that people were really saying like this is where Washington loses it, and the market would say that as well in those games, and it didn't happen. So I was holding out hope um, that they had one more in them. Obviously, they didn't. Um, I thought the difference in the game would be the Washington offensive line and Michael Penix's sack evasion that is just had been elite all season. And despite Michigan having a good pass rush, that they would be able to survive that. Um, it obviously wasn't as bad as it was against Alabama, where Milroe was just getting put on his ass every couple plays. I think they only ended up having like one or two actual sacks, but the pressure definitely got there, and Penix couldn't stay comfortable in the pocket, which is when he just dices you apart. He had to kind of move around and kind of slip guys, and we did see him do that against Texas and deliver some great throws. But in this game, he I don't know. I don't know if something was off. Obviously, he was hurt at the end of the game. I don't know how long that was bothering him for. You didn't really start to see it until the game was kind of they were already down 2 scores late is when you really started to see that he was in a lot of pain. I don't know if there was something before that was affecting his throws, or if mentally he was just kind of shook by the pressure and wasn't able to get comfortable at all. But he clearly didn't play anywhere near his best. He probably played the best game of his career against Texas, and then had a huge drop off in this game. Obviously, it looked like it could get really ugly really fast with the way Michigan started with the two huge runs that they broke for touchdowns, and then the Washington defense really settled in and really played fantastic the last 3 quarters after giving up those two huge rushing touchdowns in the first quarter. They really stepped up and looked great, and didn't give up another touchdown until the end of the game, where they were put into a really tough spot with Michigan getting good starting field position a couple of times. Is the only time they gave up scores until things kind of got out of hand. So I think their defense deserves a ton of credit for stepping up. The offense just couldn't get it done. Obviously, Dylan Johnson wasn't 100%, and you could tell when he was running the ball that he just didn't have that kind of cut, that next level kind of move that he could make. So yeah, it wasn't a great performance from Washington. The defense didn't show up in the first quarter and put them in a hole, and then when the defense stepped up, the offense just couldn't do enough to come back. So yeah, it was brutal. It was brutal. I was really hoping that we were going to be able to pull that off. But that's it. It's in the past now. I think Michigan was the better team. I think Michigan and Georgia were kind of head and shoulders above the two. They were the two best teams in the country. And yeah, so I think Michigan deserved to win the national championship. And that's it for this season. And it's time to start looking at next season. And as always, my tradition is to bet one or two college football futures the week after the national championship. I did it the day after the national championship, actually. And last year, those two teams were LSU and Washington, of course. And LSU ended up being a dud because they had the worst defense in the history of college football. Although line movement, it looked like it was the greatest future bet of all time, because I think we took them like 20 to 1 or something ridiculous, 24 to 1 maybe, after the national championship, and then they ended up being like 8 to 1 in preseason, and then obviously they lost their first game of the year to Florida State, and it all went wrong after that. But it was the right idea, I guess, which is worth nothing. But and then Washington obviously was a great future bet, 66 to 1, made it to the national championship game, and gave anybody that wanted to opportunity to hedge out and make some solid money. So this year, one really boring one and one really exciting one. So I think that's pretty fair. The two I'm going with are, we'll start with the exciting one, and that is Arizona, 100 to 1 at FanDuel. This is ticked down actually to 80 to 1 at FanDuel. I bet it at 100 to 1 the day after the national championship game. It's now at 80 to 1. I still love it at that number. It's at other books at Caesars, I think it's 40 to 1. So that price is literally cut in half. So if you can get money down at 80 to 1, I think this is going to move a ton, even in the next few weeks, let alone by the time the season starts next year. Arizona is a team that was probably the hottest team in the country to end the season, other than, I guess, Michigan and Washington were undefeated. But in terms of a team that didn't make the playoff, that was just incredible down the stretch, it was Arizona. They lit up everybody they played. Their offense ended up being just absolutely electric, and they're bringing basically everybody back. Obviously, Jed Fish was the one of the best coaches in the country. He's coming back. Noah Fafita, the quarterback, is coming back. He's unbelievable. I'm probably going to look to get a Heisman ticket on Fafita at some point for next year. But yeah, I really think the move to the Big 12 is good for them as well. I don't think any of these teams in the Big 12 are that great. The top 4 teams going into next year are probably Arizona, Utah, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, I'm definitely not a believer in bringing back Alan Bowman for his 7th year. Kansas State, I'm not really a big believer in. Obviously, Will Howard left, and people have split opinions on him, but I think they'll be in a bit of a rebuild. And then Utah, year 7 of Cam Rising, I guess, but I just don't trust Utah to dominate that conference. And I think Arizona will be the best team. So I think they win the Big 12, and with the 12-team playoff next year, that comfortably gets you into the playoff. Hopefully they get a bye. That would be huge. But I think they comfortably make the college football playoff. They do have to go to Utah and to Kansas State. That's slightly concerning. But again, with the 12-team playoff, you can comfortably drop one of those games in the regular season, still win your conference, and not have to worry about getting cut out of the college football playoff. Like in the past, and even say you go undefeated and then lose the conference championship game, you still have a pretty good shot of making that 12-team playoff, I would say. So this is a team I'm really high on going into next year. I'll have plenty of more thoughts before next season on potential bets to win the conference or whatever. But for now, like I said, that line has already dropped from 100 to 1 to 80 to 1 at FanDuel this week. So I would bet it as soon as you possibly can. Then, like I said, there's a boring one, but I'm afraid that next year the Georgia Bulldogs are going to win the national championship for the 3rd time in 4 years. They are easily the favorites. They are now at DraftKings down to plus 350, at FanDuel down to plus 300 to win the national championship for next year, which is just crazy. So I bet this at plus 450 on DraftKings the day after the national championship, and it has already moved down to plus 350, like I said, which is really tough. And I think the Saban news maybe had something to do with that. It shouldn't, theoretically, but I think people are saying that obviously weakens the SEC with Saban being out at Alabama. So that makes Georgia's path even easier. I don't think it has that much of an effect. Obviously, they lost to them this year in the SEC championship game, but um, regardless, that line is dropped. Also from people betting it, I'm sure, like myself. So um, I don't think it can go much lower. Although, like I said, FanDuel is down to plus 300. I think Caesars was at plus 325 or so. So I mean, I believe that currently the best line is DraftKings at plus 350. If you can find a better one, depending on what state you're in or where you bet, definitely go for it. But I think getting something down there is still good value, because I think they're going to be by far the best team next year. They are bringing back a lot of guys on defense, whereas the last 2 years they graduated a ton of guys to the NFL. They're actually bringing a good amount of pieces back, on top of the younger guys that they'll have coming up, that are all top recruits. Then offensively, they lose Brock Bowers, which is obviously a hit. But I think Carson Beck was the most underrated player in college football this year. I think the second half of the season, he was absolutely unbelievable, for Georgia. I think people don't realize how good he was and how another offseason of confidence and kind of building relationships with his new weapons, for next season. I think people don't realize how good he is and how good he's going to be. And I think next year they are obviously the team to beat. And I think they will comfortably win the SEC and have one of those top 4 seeds, which is going to be huge when it comes to that college football playoff, being one of those teams that gets a bye. So I I really don't see, when I look at these other top teams, I don't believe in Michigan. I think JJ McCarthy is going to the NFL, so they're going to be in a bit of a rebuild mode. Um, who knows? Harbaugh might be going to the NFL as well. Sanctions from the NCAA, whatever. Michigan is a team you definitely want to avoid. Alabama with no Nick Saban, that's a team you want to avoid. When you look at the other top teams in the country, Texas does have people coming back, although I think even with Quinn Ewers coming back and Texas kind of revamping, I think Georgia would roll them. I think Georgia would roll Ohio State is actually a team I like, but I think would roll them. So I'm going all in on Georgia. I did it 2 years ago. Right? 2 years? No, 3 years ago. Their first national championship. I had a Georgia future that summer, and ended up cashing. Not as good of a number this year now that they've established themselves as such a powerhouse, but I'm rolling with it. So Georgia plus 450 and Arizona 100-1 are my two way too early college football futures, for the 2024 season. Just talking a little bit more on this before we get into, I promise we're going to get into the NFL wildcard games briefly. I just wanted to touch on the Nick Saban thing really quick. Obviously, him being out at Alabama is huge, huge news. Somebody's going to have to come in and fill those shoes. As of now, recording this Friday morning, looks like Kalen DeBoer is the favorite to get this job. As somebody that has been so in on this Washington team the past couple of years, I think he's an unbelievable coach, but I don't love this move for him. I don't love this move for anybody. I think taking this job as the guy after Nick Saban is a total death wish. I think if you don't win a national championship in the next 2 or 3 years, people are immediately going to be saying that you're not good enough and want to push you out of town. And I don't think they have the talent to be winning a national championship right now. So it would really, I don't think it's a great move for Kalen DeBoer. I think he's building something really good at Washington. Had Will Rogers transfer in, so he has a quarterback for next year. And with their move to the Big Ten, I really think they're in pretty good shape. So I would wait it out and try to build something really solid at Washington before trying to make a jump to another job if I was Kalen DeBoer. Obviously, that's what Dan Lanning decided to do, and I think that was the right move from him. He was maybe the top choice originally, and he pretty quickly came out and said that he is going to be staying at Oregon, and I think that's really smart. I would not want to be the guy taking this job after Saban because I think you'll end up getting pushed out before you can really start to build something yourself at Alabama, and then who knows where you go from there. I'm sure Kalen DeBoer or whoever, Mike Norvell, whoever ends up taking this job, even if things don't work out, I'm sure they will get another job. But that being said, I think you're better off trying to stay where you are if you're one of these really hot coaches like DeBoer or Norvell or Lanning and or Lane Kiffin, and just continuing to build up your kind of thing and then waiting for the right moment. Maybe wait for the guy after the guy to go, whoever that is. Um, which is why I think Tommy Reese almost kind of makes sense for Alabama. I think if you're Alabama, it's like you almost just want a couple years of let's just try to keep the program in like a stable place. This guy was already on the coaching staff. He knows all the recruits, at least on the offensive side of the ball. Let's just keep him here, keep things steady for a couple years. We're not going to win anything. That's fine. And we can just kind of take a deep breath and wait for the perfect candidate to be ready to come take this job. So I don't think that's a terrible idea from Alabama. And I don't think it's a terrible idea for guys like Kalen DeBoer and Mike Norvell. I know that's huge money that's going to get thrown at you to go to Alabama, the prestige, the national attention, but I wouldn't want to be taking that job personally. I think in the era of transfer portal and NIL, it's less important to be at a school like Alabama. You see like what Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss is doing in the transfer portal with NIL, what Dan Lanning's doing in Oregon. I think it's much easier than it ever was to kind of build up a mini powerhouse at one of those programs. And again, with the 12-team playoff, you don't need to be one of the 4 best teams in the country to kind of get to that next level. You have to be one of the 12 or at least 11 with the group of 5 team getting in. You have to be one of the best 11 teams in the country to get into that playoff. So I think that leaves the door open for guys like Lane at Ole Miss and Dan Lanning at Oregon to just kind of stay there. You're getting that playoff revenue share that's making so much more money for the program by just being one of the best 11 teams, not one of the best 4 teams. So I think that is pretty massive. And I think that is part of the reason that those guys are more willing to stay where they are rather than take the chance at being the guy at Alabama. So it seems like Kalen DeBoer is the favorite. By the time this podcast comes out, he may have already been hired. Mike Norvell is the backup option. I don't think he would do great there, but I think he is maybe in a better spot to just kind of move on from Florida State after what happened there last season and just try to start something new. But I think the Tommy Reese thing kind of makes sense, honestly. Not that I think Alabama is going to win a national championship with Tommy Reese, but I think in terms of just try to keep things stable and just take a breath for a year or two after Nick Saban and then move in on the target you really want next offseason. Kind of makes sense to me. But finally, moving on to the NFL Wildcard weekend. There's some really good matchups. I'm personally super pumped for these games. I'm just going to go through one game at a time, go through just some quick thoughts. I have a bet for every game, going to give my bet. And then also have some fun playoff long futures, guys to lead the postseason in rushing touchdowns, receiving yards, things like that. And then I also have a correlated same game parlay for every single game, all 6 games of the wild card weekend. Just something fun, a little something extra to throw down in these big playoff games to get some action that all have some really good odds, but I think if the script goes the right way, then are correlated to give you a pretty decent shot of hitting. I think if you hit one of them, it would pay for all 6. If you hit 2 of them, you're in really good shape. So gonna dive into those. In terms of current futures, I gave out the Ravens 30-1 to win the Super Bowl before the season. That's obviously great with them now being the 1 seed. I gave out Bills 50 to 1 at the beginning of December when it looked like their season was in tough shape, and they are the 2 seed. So obviously that worked out great. I bet the Texans 55 to 1 around the same time as that Bills bet. I regret it a bit. I don't think that they're capable of winning the Super Bowl, but they did end up winning the division and getting the 4 seed, which is huge. Um, so if they beat the Browns, you're basically having that Texans 55 to 1 future gives you a built-in hedge against the Bills or the Ravens, whoever they would be playing in that next round. So having those 3 futures, I think, is a really good place to be. The only team that I'm really worried about is the 49ers. I think Ravens, Bills, 49ers are those top 3 teams in the league by a good margin. I think it's a drop-off after those 3 teams to anybody else. So the 49ers are who I'm worried about, but you would have a good hedge spot theoretically against the Bills or Ravens in the Super Bowl. So we'll worry about that when we get to it. The only other future I added that's team future is an exact result of the Super Bowl. This is on DraftKings. I just went through and was looking to see if there's any value on any of these, and I did bet Bills over the Cowboys at 30 to 1. The Cowboys are the 2 seed, so this isn't surprising, but I do think they are easily the second best team in the NFC. I think if they get that rematch with the Lions in the 2-3 matchup, I think they beat the Lions again, especially at home. And I think they would have a shot against the 49ers. The 49ers have killed them in the playoffs the last few years, but I think this is by far the best Cowboys team under Mike McCarthy. So I think they would have a shot to pull it off. And I think the Bills are the best team in the AFC, honestly. So I think the 30 to 1 Bills over Cowboys exact result is a really interesting future on DraftKings. So I did bet that. And getting into the first game is going to be Browns Texans. And that line is currently at Browns -2. The over-under is 44.5. CJ Stroud, rookie quarterback, making his first postseason start. Traditionally, rookie quarterbacks or anybody making their first postseason start tends to struggle. There's a few guys making their first postseason starts here in this playoff. CJ Stroud, Mason Rudolph, Jordan Love. I think that's it. Those 3. And so we'll see how it goes for those guys. I do think that CJ Stroud is head and shoulders above most rookie quarterbacks, even ones that end up making the playoffs that we've seen in the last 20 years. So I trust CJ Stroud. He's played in massive games in college. Not that totally compares, but he's played in playoff games at the college level. So he knows what it's like kind of in that big game environment. He's been really, really good all season. I trust him. I don't think the Texans are going to lose this game because of him. I think if they lose this game, it would be because of their defense. But ultimately, it's the beautiful story. People are loving it. I think this is the most publicly bet team in the entire wildcard round is the Browns. The Joe Flacco comeback player of the year. People are betting them to win the Super Bowl, saying they're the dark horse to come out of the AFC. I just don't buy it with the Browns. Flacco, despite him lighting it up and being really fun, has had serious turnover issues. I don't trust him to not turn the ball over in this game. And CJ Stroud, I think, is still the better quarterback in this matchup. And despite his depleted weapons, I think if the Texans can just prioritize taking away Amari Cooper, who killed them when they played in the regular season, which CJ Stroud didn't play in that game, that the Browns won. I think they could be in pretty decent shape if they take away Amari Cooper. And the Browns defense is really, really good. We know that, but I just think CJ Stroud has something special, and I think this Texans team can win this game. I bet the Texans at +3. which obviously is a much better number than +2 with how important that 3 is. Um, so I would wait a bit. Like I said, the Browns have been a popular public pick. Maybe by tomorrow, another 3 pops. But if not, I would just play the 2.5 or 2. I think the Texans end up winning this game, and so I'm rolling with CJ Stroud. The correlated same game parlay that I made for this one, I'm going to put it up on the screen so everybody can see it. But it's Nico Collins anytime touchdown. I think he's by far weapon number 1 in this current Texans offense. David Njoku anytime touchdown. I think Amari Cooper is going to get a ton of attention, like I said, and I think Njoku's a beast, and he'll end up finding the end zone here. And then Flacco, 225 plus yards, Stroud, 200 plus yards. And then, like I said, I like Njoku and Collins, so I went with Njoku 40 plus yards, Nico Collins 50 plus yards. And I do think maybe there's a little more offense in this game than people anticipate because of how good the Browns defense has been. And so I'm throwing an alternate total of 41.5 into this as well. So that's a little over 10-1. That's the first correlated same game parlay. That's the Texans over the Browns. The next game is the Chiefs and the Dolphins. This game is possibly going to set records for the coldest temperature of an NFL playoff game. It's going to be possibly like -30 wind chill is what I was seeing. I don't know if people can even go to this game. Like, is that even like legally safe to be outside? I don't know. I would not be going to this game. I'm sure there will be plenty of Chiefs fans there. I don't know about people coming from Miami. But it should be a really fun game. The Dolphins obviously sputtered down the stretch, ended up blowing their division shot. Now, instead of hosting the Steelers, they're going to Kansas City. I don't know if there's a bigger flip in your playoff probability of winning the Super Bowl, of getting to face the Steelers in the first round versus going to the Chiefs. But here they are. In a tough spot. They're a little banged up, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They're missing a lot of guys. But the Chiefs offense has their own issues. Rashee Rice has basically been the only suitable target for Patrick Mahomes over the past few weeks, and that includes Travis Kelce. I do have a feeling that Travis Kelce is going to wake up in the postseason. I think he is possibly going to have a big game here against the Dolphins. I don't know. He's obviously getting older. The lack of other weapons, he's probably getting more attention. Taylor Swift, some people are saying, but I do think Travis Kelce wakes up here and has a good game against the Dolphins. And I really can't see the Chiefs losing this game. I did bet this at Chiefs -3 for 2 units. Obviously, the line has moved significantly since then, out to 4.5. I would not lay it at 4.5. Patrick Mahomes as a favorite of 3 or less, or as an underdog, is the best quarterback in the history of the NFL. Basically, he's unbelievable. He just doesn't lose games like this. He doesn't lose home games in the postseason. And I don't see him doing it here against the Dolphins team that has a lot of issues on defense. And their offense hasn't been very reliable either. And Tua, in these cold temperatures, Tua's been really bad in cold weather games so far in his NFL career. I just don't trust them at all. Although the Chiefs are not great winning with margin, so I don't love this 4.5. So I think if you can, not if you can, but if you want to, the way I would approach this, if you miss the Chiefs -3 line, is to bet a Chiefs Bills moneyline parlay. I bet that as well earlier in the week, and I did get it at much better odds because both teams, the line has moved in their favor since then. But I still like that. Even you can get it at -135. I even still like it there. I know that's pretty juicy, but Bills cannot at all see them losing their game. The Chiefs, I'm really, really confident in them taking care of business. Like I said, I put 2 units on them -3 and bet this Chiefs Bills money line parlay. So really a 3-unit bet on the Chiefs to win this game. So I'm really confident. I think the Chiefs defense is still underrated. I think people don't realize how good this Chiefs defense is. I think they're really gonna step up and shut down what the Dolphins want to do. Especially, I think the Dolphins are going to try to go run heavy, and I think the Chiefs are going to be ready for that. I think they're going to defend really well, and I think at the end of the day, especially in the bad weather, Mahomes is going to end up making the throws needed to win the game, and Tua is going to end up making a mistake or two. So I just touched on that, or real quick, the Chiefs same game parlay. This is the shortest one I did. I don't love how either offense is going to perform, which is kind of how you have to bet these same game parlays. So I did go with Chiefs money line, Justin Watson 25 plus yards, and then a Raheem Mostert anytime touchdown, and that is plus 632. So that is what I like there. But like I just said, it just touched on the Bills game, talked about how I bet this Bills Chiefs money line parlay. That is the only way that I have bet this Bills game. I think the Bills are really good. I love the Bills. I think this line has maybe just gotten a touch too high. If I had to bet it, I would lay the 10 still with the Bills. I think there's a chance they just absolutely roll. But this is another game where bad weather could be an impact. The high winds in Buffalo could be really tough. Tough conditions to throw in, particularly, although I think that will affect Mason Rudolph and the Steelers way more than it will affect the Bills. This whole lake effect thing that blows in these crazy winds. Josh Allen has played in those games before. He's more comfortable, and he also has probably the strongest arm in the entire NFL, which is what you need in these windy conditions, is a quarterback that can just whip the ball through the wind. And also what has made the Bills offense so good the past few weeks hasn't been throwing the ball down the field to Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis. It's been running the ball with Josh Allen, running the ball with James Cook in the short pass game to James Cook and Dalton Kincaid. So I think that's going to be the approach, is not throw the ball up into the wind, but just these little short passes, run plays, quarterback designed runs, scrambling from Josh Allen when it's not there. I think ultimately they're going to roll and they're going to get their points. And I think it's going to be really hard for Mason Rudolph and the Steelers to get anything done. Obviously, no TJ Watt helps even more with Josh Allen, especially being able to scramble out of the pocket. TJ Watt is a guy that normally you would like to be able to chase down somebody like Josh Allen and not let him scramble out of the pocket. But I think he's going to be able to do that. So I think this could be a really tough game for the Steelers. I think they'll struggle to really put up any points at all. So I think this could be like a 21-10 Bills type of game. I guess that would say that I like the under, although I'm not betting it myself, because I think it could just get a little bit out of hand where the Bills put up a couple late scores or have a defensive score or something like that. So staying away from that. The only bet I have is the Chiefs Bills moneyline parlay. And then this correlated same game parlay, I did the Bills alternate spread -5.5, a James Cook anytime touchdown, Freiermuth 2+ receptions, Dalton Kincaid 3+ receptions, and James Cook 50+ rushing yards at +483 for that one. Moving on to Sunday's games, we start with the Packers, who are +7 against the Cowboys. The over-under is 50.5. This is a great storyline. Mike McCarthy against his old team, hosting the Packers. Jordan Love's first playoff game. Two really exciting offenses. I think both teams are going to be able to score the ball pretty efficiently. I didn't bet the over, but I do like it. I may end up getting a little bit down on it Sunday morning. We'll see where the number's at. I really think both these teams are going to be able to score. Cowboys offense has obviously been great, especially at home. But I think people don't realize how good this Packers offense has been the past few weeks. And they've not been anywhere near 100%. They haven't had all of their weapons in a game in forever. But Specifically, Christian Watson, who's been out the past couple weeks, is supposed to be back for this game, which would be massive for the Packers if that is the case. And I think they're going to be able to score. I think Jordan Love is going to be able to handle this. Like we were talking about guys playing their first playoff game, but I think the experience he had, even as a backup and just being in the league for a while, and the way he played the last few weeks, I'm pretty confident in how he's going to perform. So I like the Packers here. I bet them plus 7.5. And I think the Cowboys probably ultimately end up winning the game, but if the Packers upset them, I would not be shocked at all, especially the way Mike McCarthy has been in the playoffs over the years. So I like the Packers here. Give me the Packers plus 7.5. I think they have enough offense to keep up. In the same game parlay I'm betting here is a Jaden Reed anytime touchdown and Jaden Reed 25 plus yards. He's been great. And then Packers plus 8.5, just getting an extra point there in case some weird missed extra point, 2-point conversion thing. Over 43.5, and Jordan Love to throw 2+ passing touchdowns. The next game is our other great storyline. It is the quarterbacks playing their former teams. Jared Goff and the Lions against his old team, the Rams, and Matt Stafford returning to Detroit for the first time in a playoff game. This game should be awesome. The spread is Lions -3. The over-under is 51.5. I like the Rams here. I bet 2 units on the Rams plus 3.5. I also bet a unit on the over 51.5. I think we see tons of points here. That shouldn't be surprising to anybody. I don't think the Rams defense is very good. I think they could do enough to hang in this game, which is why I like them plus 3.5. But mostly my Rams bet is about the offense. I think Stafford is going to have the game of his life. I think Nakua and Kupp and all their weapons, the Lions are going to have no answer. I think both of these teams are going to move it up and down the field. It's going to be a shootout. It's going to be the best game of the weekend. I really am looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be a blast. I think maybe the Lions ultimately win the game. I'm not betting the money line for a reason. But I do think over a field goal, I think this game easily could go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and one team ultimately wins it on a last-second field goal. So I'm going with the Rams plus 3.5 and the over 51.5. And the same game parlay I have here is Rams plus 7.5, over 43.5. Both quarterbacks, I think, like I said, are going to have a big day. So Stafford 250 plus, Goff 225 plus, Puka Nakua 40 plus, Amon-Ra St. Brown 50 plus, and Matt Stafford to throw 2+ passing touchdowns. Moving on to the final game, that is the Monday night game, which is the Eagles at the Bucs. The Eagles, at one point in time, people were saying they were the best team in the NFL. Anybody that said that and you listen to them, don't ever listen to them again. Anybody that watched this team knew they weren't the best team in the NFL, even when they were 10-1 or whatever their record was. They lost to Zach Wilson. That should have told you everything you need to know about what this team really was about. They were frauds the whole time. They got exposed. Cowboys won the division. They're now going to Tampa Bay to take on Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. This game kind of sucks, honestly. I think the first 5 games all have awesome kind of storylines. This is more to teams that are just setting up to get demolished by whoever they play in the next round. So it's kind of lame. The Bucs did a really nice job. They were not supposed to contend for the NFC South. Baker Mayfield had a great season. And they did a really good job of getting here. But that being said, I think Baker Mayfield's health isn't anywhere near 100% right now. I think their offense is going to struggle. Despite how bad the Eagles defense has been, I think the Bucs are going to struggle to move the ball. They don't really run the ball very well at all. I think it's going to be easy for the Eagles to defend them and kind of take away what they want to do. And then the Eagles offense has a lot of issues of their own. Jalen Hurts has the hurt finger that he dislocated or whatever happened to it in the Giants game last week. So I think this is going to be a pretty boring game. I think the Eagles are going to run the ball a ton. I think that's what most of this game is going to be. It's just the Eagles running the football, holding a lot of time in possession. I think they're going to get into the end zone a couple of times, and the Bucs are going to struggle. I think ultimately the Eagles win kind of a low scoring, ugly game. So I did bet the Eagles -2.5 and under 45. I do like both of the current numbers, bet the Eagles -3 and the under at 43.5. So that's what I like there. And the same game parlay I came up with is Eagles +3.5. A Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown. This is kind of, I'm flirting with disaster betting the under 45, but I did put an alternate over 38.5 in there. I do think that the Eagles get to like 24. And then K Daughton over 21.5 receiving yards and over 2.5 total receptions. So that's what I have there for this last same game parlay. And then I did one ultimate same game parlay, technically same game parlay plus, throwing in a leg, at least one leg from each game for the whole playoffs. That just for fun, obviously don't put too much on this, but it is the Texans +7.5 and the over 39.5 in that game. The Rams +8.5 over 43.5 in that game. Chiefs money line, Bills -5.5 alt spread, Packers +14.5 alt spread, and the Eagles money line, that's +1630. I think that's a really fun one. I really like all those legs. I think maybe something weird with the Bills winning the game, but maybe a backdoor kind of on that 5.5 number could throw it off. Maybe the Eagles are the two that aren't great, but you could potentially hedge out of that Eagles if it makes it all the way to Monday night. So I think that's fun. So the last thing I'm going to touch on and then going to wrap it up here are these playoff long props. So there's a big market for these. It's who's going to have the most yards or touchdowns at basically every position, passing, rushing, or receiving throughout the playoffs. And there are a few that do have good value. Obviously, what you want to look for here are the teams that you think are at least capable of making it to the Super Bowl. Obviously, you don't want to bet Amari Cooper to have the most receiving yards if you don't think the Browns are going to win more than one game, or whoever. Tua to have the most passing yards if you don't think the Dolphins will even beat the Chiefs. It's not really a smart way to go. You want to bet a team that is probably at least going to win one or two games. It also kind of makes sense not to bet one of the teams from the 1 seed, the Ravens or the 49ers, because theoretically, if a team, unless they play each other in the Super Bowl, then at least one team will have played one more game, which gives an extra game of stats. So it kind of makes sense to look at somebody from the Bills or the Chiefs or the Cowboys, somebody that could make the Super Bowl and play the maximum amount of games. And that's mostly where I went. I did sprinkle in maybe one extra, but for most receiving yards, I bet Khalil Shakir from the Bills at +7,500. He was their leading receiver in the game against Miami. That was their biggest game of the year. He's been a really popular target for Josh Allen the last few weeks since their offense kind of changed up. And I think he's totally capable of going off in a couple games. And like I said, the Bills, I think they're going to end up winning the Super Bowl. Honestly, they're my Super Bowl pick. So I bet Khalil Shakir 75-1 at DraftKings, and then Gabe Davis 80-1 at FanDuel. Obviously, we know Gabe Davis has games where he just disappears and doesn't even get a target, but he also has games where he'll have a 90-yard touchdown. So I think having those two guys as the number 2 and number 3 receiver outside of Stephon Diggs in Buffalo are great value. So those two I went with for most receiving yards. For touchdowns, it's a little more open. I did do James Cook to have the most rushing touchdowns in the playoffs, 18-1. He's been great the last few weeks. And again, going with the Bills. So I think 18-1 is really good value on their starting running back. And then for most receiving touchdowns, I went with 3 tight ends. The tight ends really not getting as much love as the receivers, which doesn't really make sense because some of these top teams, a lot of them target these tight ends heavily in the end zone. And so I went with Travis Kelce plus 2,000. I don't love this Chiefs team. I really think if it would be Chiefs Bills in the next round. Um, and I don't see the Chiefs beating the Bills. But that being said, obviously they could. Obviously they could go all the way to the Super Bowl if you have Patrick Mahomes. Any of that is possible. So I think getting 20-1 on Kelsey is a crazy price based on how good he's been in the postseason the last couple of years. So I took that, and then I took 2 other tight ends from the 2 AFC teams I think could make the Super Bowl. That is Isaiah Likely 40-1 and Dalton Kincaid 50-1. Obviously, those are younger, more unproven guys, but at the end of the day, I think that the 3 tight ends from the 3 best teams in the AFC to get 20-1, 40-1, 50-1 are good odds there to have the most receiving touchdowns. So that's it for me to run through just my main NFL wildcard bets really quickly before I sign off. That would be Texans +3, Chiefs -3, Chiefs Bills moneyline parlay, Packers +7.5, Rams +3.5, over 51.5 in that game, Eagles -2.5 and under 45 in Eagles Bucs. And then everything else, those bets will be up, the same game parlays and everything on the screen. So if you're looking for those, go ahead and add them for some little extra action. Not enough to take off too much from your winnings, hopefully, from these other games, but just something fun. And if a couple of them hit, it'd be awesome. But that's it for the NFL wildcard weekend preview. I'll have another preview next week for the divisional round and all the way through the rest of the Super Bowl. And then we'll go from there. Try to have some guests on starting next week. I know this was a really long episode with just me, so anybody that's made it this far, 52 minutes in, greatly appreciated. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already, or subscribe if you're listening on audio on Apple or Spotify. It is greatly appreciated. It was an awesome college football season. This is kind of the end of the main season for me, but still a few good weeks of NFL left. So thanks to everybody that followed along all season, and see ya.